Hi, Geeta. How are you?
I'm good. How are
Nice to
you,
see
Brian?
you. My name is Brian Taylor. I am a senior director at Cambridge Associates, where I head up the business development efforts for the Northeast region. I'm delighted to be here today, and I'm particularly excited to introduce you to Geeta Kapadia. I'm going to provide you a little bit of a bio, which is really impressive, and then we're going to have a few questions about what Geeta actually does, and then sort of her viewpoint on diversity and inclusion, and a couple of other things. So with that, let me give you a little bit of background, which is terrific. Geeta Kapadia is an associate treasurer of investments at Yale New Haven Health System, where she leads a 5-person team responsible for managing assets of approximately $4 billion. That's with a B. And with over 20 years of institutional investment experience, Geeta joined Yale New Haven Health in 2009 after working at Mercer Investment Consulting in London and Edinburgh, where she was a consultant providing strategic investment advice to institutional investors. She has also held positions at Capital Metrics and Risk Solutions in Pune, India, and Stratford Advisory Group in Chicago. Geeta holds a bachelor's degree in mathematics from the University of Chicago and a master's degree in financial markets and trading from the Illinois Institute of Technology. She is a CFA charter holder and holds the UK's investment management certificate. She is a member of the CFA Institute, CFA Society of Philadelphia, CFA Society of India, and 100 Women in Finance. She is a Board of Trustees member for Chester County Family Academy and a volunteer for the Delaware County Medical Reserve Corps. So she is a powerhouse, and I am really excited to talk to her today and really kind of get into this conversation about diversity and inclusion, and really talk a little bit about her role at Yale New Haven Health, which is really, really fascinating given that we are in this environment today with COVID happening and all of the things that pertain to that. I really want to start off, Geeta, by just saying thank you for all of your efforts. You are somewhat indirectly impacting the healthcare efforts, but it's a real fundamental thing that you are actually doing for all of us. And I just really want to humbly say thank you for all of your work in healthcare.
It's a great position to be in. We're very happy to be able to support the efforts, as I'm sure you can appreciate.
Yeah, no, it's pretty amazing. Why don't we just start off by getting into what is, you are the CIO at Yale New Haven, but help us understand, what your role is and what does that actually entail for the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are a 5-person team. We are located out of our primary campus in New Haven. I actually work remotely from my house outside of Philadelphia about 80% of the time, but my team is all located in New Haven. We are responsible for the prudent investment of all of the system assets that are considered to be non-operating, sort of under a year's worth of duration type assets. We think about it in 3 sort of broad buckets. One is the defined benefit pension plans assets of the organization, which is about $1.5 billion or so. The other is our sort of short to medium term operating assets. That's about another $1.2 billion or so. And then the remainder is in what we consider to be our long-term investment portfolio. So that's a traditional, sort of like an endowment or a foundation type portfolio, really just meant to support the efforts of the system.
As we mentioned, we're all experiencing this COVID situation. How has that impacted what you do, or what are some of the challenges that are facing the healthcare organizations today, particularly Yale New Haven, if any?
Yeah, so as you're probably aware, the New York tri-state area got hit very hard, very quickly as it related to COVID. In particular, one of our system hospitals, Greenwich Hospital, was sort of right in that hot spot with regards to early impact of the pandemic. So, we all had to mobilize very quickly with regards to leadership, financing, people, all of those things kind of all coincided at the same time. And so it was a very stressful time for the organization, just as it has been for many organizations across both the United States as well as outside. I think that people were really very level-headed and very calm and collected, very similar to the way you sort of think of a physician or a surgeon going into surgery. It may be a very, very high pressure situation, but they're very calm. They're very collective. They rely on their training. And we saw that very quickly come into play in March and April. So it's been a very fascinating time to work in both finance as well as healthcare at the same time. And I think the intersection of those two has just been a really rewarding place for me personally and for my team as well.
As you think about your career in this intersection between healthcare, and investment management, as you over the span of your career, is there something that you learned along the way that was sort of fundamental to how you operate now, or some, the fundamental tools of the road that kind of help you do what you do as a CIO?
To be honest, I think the biggest thing, and this may be a cliche, is just really communication. So when you think about the stakeholders that we deal with on a regular basis, whether it's investment managers, whether it's a custodian, whether it's a record keeper, whether it's our own colleagues in our corporate accounting department, whether it's our investment committee, our CFO, all of those people are really, in an ideal world, pulling for the same goal. We're all trying to achieve the same goal. We may come at it from different angles, but at the end of the day, our objective is to support the operations of the system. So I think everybody looks at it in a different lens, from a different lens. And so it's really important for us to try and communicate in a way that those individuals can understand, or those groups can understand. Because I do work remotely, and I have worked remotely for a very long time, communication is just fundamental to everything I do. So, when you think about, and we've all experienced it now over the past few months, having to work remotely, there's challenges. It's, there's no doubt about it. It's not just like being in the office 100%. I think everybody knows that and recognizes it. There are ways to overcome those challenges and alleviate them. But at the end of the day, it's really communication. And without being able to understand the best way to communicate with the people on the other side of the table, your best intentions could just completely not come to fruition. So I feel like that, to be, is sort of the underlying foundation for everything that I'm trying to accomplish.
And communication, it's somewhat natural skill, but it is a skill that you can learn and develop over time. And obviously, the more you're doing it, the better you get at it. As you've thought about your career and the people involved in it and who you've communicated with, mentors versus role models, have there been people in your life that have really kind of served in that capacity for you, that as a role model or a mentor that has kind of helped you think about your career to get you to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think as many of us experienced, my parents were, my very first sort of mentors. I remember when we were trying to decide whether or not to make a move to London, my father was very clear and said, you have an opportunity and you shouldn't forego that opportunity without a really strong reason. And so I think that kind of support and encouragement was really key to kind of changing a lot of the trajectory of what I've done over the past 15 years. So, kind of stemming from that, I think I can think of a lot of both women and men that I've encountered in leadership roles who have really been very inspirational, have served as role models. And I think when I think about mentorship, I sort of think about it in two, broad categories. You have kind of very senior leaders who you can look up to, you can follow, you can watch, you can read about, but then you also have the day-to-day mentor, right? The people who are really, they're going to invest the time in you. They're going to have the time. You call them up, you text them, you say, what, I have a problem. Is there some time that we can, and they're the ones who are going to pick up the phone and say, yes, let's work on this together, because they really are rooting for you as an individual to accomplish what you're trying to do. So, on that side of the equation, I can think of so many people in the UK, in Edinburgh, in Chicago, in Connecticut, who have just really served such a great role to me as a supporter, encourager, and at the end of the day, their success is my success. So I'm really very fortunate to have had those experiences.
As I was thinking about this conversation in the context of diversity and inclusion and everything, the landscape that we're in today, given all the stuff that's in the current events, as a woman of color, has any of that impacted your ability to sort of through the progression of your career? Have there been instances where you've had challenges as a professional woman in that capacity? And if so, can you share those experiences with us, or an experience with us?
Having been in the industry for a number of years, we've seen it change, right? We've come a ways, I think, from the sort of expectation that you're sitting in the investment committee room and are you there to take notes, or are you actually going to make a recommendation? And I've definitely experienced, the former at the start of my career, having sort of just been seen as the junior analyst, or being seen as, the person who is just kind of there to be a support as opposed to be a leader. That transition is hard for everybody. I think it's doubly hard for women and for people of color, because the assumption is just that the white male in the room is the one who's leading the charge.
Sure.
Yeah. And it's a difficult, I think we've all talked about and all heard about, we all have biases, all of us. And so that bias is a really hard one to overcome when you see, groups of leaders, whether it's in the government, whether it's in private industry, whatever it is, you can see those leaders, and you see a sea of, white faces looking back at you. And so it's understandable why people naturally or subconsciously kind of don't see an individual that is not one of those classes as the leader in the room. I think that it's changed a lot. I'm really happy about that. I think being able to see people like me, like you, whoever you are, I think that goes a long way in making people feel like there is a seat for me at the table, and I can make a difference. So, I continue to be hopeful and be optimistic, but I think as the last few months have shown, it's not something that we can sort of all ascribe to in principle and not actually make any progress, from a day-to-day perspective. So unless we're willing to do the work, it's just going to continue on and keep going the way it is.
As I think about that, as you are now in the seat of doing hiring and you're hiring employees, how does the calculus, of hiring and then putting the sort of this overlay of diversity and inclusion into that process? Like what's your thinking about that, and how do you think about hiring now? How does diversity and inclusion sort of play a role in that process for you?
As stewards of capital, as allocators, we have particular responsibility to try and do our part to alleviate some of this, very heavily biased leadership and sort of representation across our industry. So I'm very encouraged by, particularly on the allocator side, you can see quite a lot of women and people of color in these seats, in the deputy CIO and the CIO position. And that, I think, continues to improve year after year. And it's wonderful to watch that progress. On the other hand, I think we also have a responsibility to try and bring people along that path. Yep. So to demonstrate to younger people who are starting their careers out or are mid-career that this is a seat that you can accomplish someday if that's what you want. And maybe it's not on the allocator side, maybe it's on the money management side, maybe it's, in a different capacity, but it is a position that you should be able to accomplish, and we're going to help you do that. So I think when we think about hiring, particularly at the junior levels, we're really wanting to make sure that we're accessing all of the avenues that will give us a higher chance of identifying a person that is going to add to our team. And, that's either diversity in background, that's diversity in experience, that's diversity in education, diversity in, the types of professional organizations they have been involved with. What we can do, I think, is just leverage our time to identify organizations that can help us really fix that balance and continue to build that pipeline. One of the things we hear quite often is, well, there's nobody for me to hire. I can't find those people. I don't have a choice. And I think that's a very easy excuse to use, but unless you can say, and so now I am going to reach out to organizations, reach out to my alma mater, reach out to educational institutions around me to identify who some people are that might be interested in this career. That's really the second half of the story.
As I was thinking about your profile, and I was thinking about you in particular, everyone has a superpower that they have. And I think you might have several, but as you think about, the talent that you have and that you bring to bear, are there any specific tools that just come naturally to you at this point? Some of this stuff is obviously a learned skill set in many ways, but what's your superpower that you would sort of ascribe to yourself at this point?
I mean, I've been really fortunate in my career and in my life to have been able to have had professional and personal experiences in places outside of the United States. So I'm from Chicago originally. I sort of, I went to school there. I thought I'd live my whole life there. And life took a turn. And now I've been able to live in, 3 different countries and in a number of different states in our country. It's really been a steep learning curve to be able to, again, going back to communication, to be able to communicate with people in India, in the UK. We speak English, but we speak it with different meaning. And so that, was a really tough thing for me to do. And I think I'm by no means an expert, but I think being able to sort of reach back to those experiences that I had when I am in situations, working with other people from outside of the United States, I think that has really helped me quite a bit. To be able to sort of understand what they're thinking about, understand what they're going through, understand how their experience is different to mine, and trying to, be on the other side of the table and really say, okay, what I think is reasonable maybe is not reasonable for them. And so again, kind of goes back to that communication thing. It's not an easy thing to do. I feel like we tend to under communicate because we're worried about offending someone or taking up too much of their time or, whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, I think you're really saving yourself time in the end if you preclude a lot of that back and forth and wishy-washy stuff. So that to me is a big part of, and then, this is a common thing I think for people in our industry, but curiosity. It's very easy to sort of have your mind set about doing things a certain way. So, maybe it's a manager, investment manager, maybe it's a strategy that you like, maybe it's a firm that you like, it's very easy to sort of think this is the way to do it. And the reason why is because I've always done it this way.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the ability to sort of play devil's advocate, step back, say, you know what, maybe I should contemplate doing it a different way. And maybe that's not the right way to proceed, but there's definitely a lot of value add in considering it. So the curiosity and I think the confidence, self-awareness to say, maybe I'm not right. maybe the way I've always done it is not necessarily the right way to do it. So what can I do to change my viewpoint?
Your bio didn't get into this, but you and I have spoken before, and we, one of the things that you had mentioned to me is that when you started at Yale New Haven, you started at 1 billion, and now you're at 4 billion. And I think it's a wonderful testament to just what you bring to the table for the organization and all that is required to do that. So, with that, thank you for all of your contributions to Yale New Haven, to the healthcare system there. It was a pleasure to talk to you today, and I'm sure that we will probably get a lot of questions as a result of this video, but we just wanted to say thank you.
Well, thank you, Brian. It was really nice to speak with you.